Okay, if we could please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, present is myself, Christina Knightsky-Troike. Also present is Candace Bilski and Susanna Stylen. And Mike Carroll on, what is today's?
December 9th.
December 9th at 2:14.
Madam Chair, may I take care of some housekeeping matters?
Yes.
I did have a conversation with attorneys for both sides in the hallway. One of the issues that we addressed was the adoption of the rules of procedure of the Municipal Officers Electoral Board of the Village of Homer Glen, Illinois. As you'll all recall, there was a draft that was prepared before the first hearing, which was November 8th. The rules were discussed at that open hearing. However, they do make reference to a member of the Electoral Board, and that would be the Honorable Dan Fialco, who recused himself on that date and was replaced by the Honorable Susanna Stylen, S-T-E-I-L-E-N. And they are not dated because the printed out version was a draft that was then tendered to attorneys for both sides after they were adopted by this board. So talking to the two attorneys, they're asking for a stipulation to be entered onto the record, which I'm recommending you go along with, is that these rules be amended to replace the name of Dan Fialco with Susanna Stylen and to incorporate the adoption date of 11/8/24. So stipulated, councils?
Yes.
That takes care of the first matter. The second matter, Mr. Brueggemann asked if the Honorable Chair would be willing to stipulate, and I did discuss with her just briefly right here, she would agree to stipulate that prior to the objections being filed, she did publicly endorse one or more of the candidates for office for next year's election for the village trustees of the Village of Homer Glen, and that she ceased any further public support or endorsements once those objections were filed and she became chair of this electoral board. Does that suffice for a stipulation for the two of you?
For me, yes.
Mr. Brueggemann?
As of what date did she stop doing any?
The date that your clients filed their objections to the petitions of Mr. Mueller?
Any objection that was
So
filed?
any objection being filed before the
Yeah.
clerk? Okay.
So that would
I
have
don't
been
remember what
like
date that was.
November 4th, I think.
Let me see if I have stamped copies. I don't know if I do.
I just want a date for the stipulation.
Yes, the stamped copy I have from the village is November 4th, 2024.
So I would stipulate if the chairman of the election board would stipulate that she has solicited no person to support or vote for candidates in the upcoming general election for the village trustees after November 4th, 2024.
That is the stipulation she offered, yes.
I would accept that.
Okay.
I think we should reduce those to writing if, I mean, I know it'll come out
That's fine.
sooner or later, but
Yes.
It might even be before that, but we
Okay.
can go,
But no,
we
that's
can say it's November
fine.
4th.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand what you said.
She said it might have even been before that, and I said as long as we're using that date as the date certain, that's fine.
Anything else?
That's it for the two stipulations. I don't know, Mr. Brueggemann, if you wanted to bring up the remaining issue of testimony, we can address those issues now, or do you want to just do it as the case organically moves on?
Well, I would think it's more appropriate to do it when it's my turn to call witnesses, but if you want to do it now, that's fine with me.
Well, we can address that issue now, at least so you can perfect the
It's
record.
fine with me.
Okay.
Tell me what you would stipulate that you're going to do with respect to the clerk and the mayor as board members if I call them as a witness.
All right. So as far as the mayor goes, the only thing you said you wanted her to testify to was that she endorsed or supported some of the candidates for office in this race, which is why I just proposed the stipulation that we entered into. So I thought that addressed her testimony. You did mention you wanted to call one other member of the electoral board, and that is Candace Bielski, in her capacity as village clerk. And I indicated to you that I was concerned that was an effort to disqualify her from this electoral board, and that therefore I would.
I'd object to those, them being called as witnesses.
Okay, that was discussed in our conversation pre-hearing, that Mr. Abbasi would object. And probably for, I don't know, but probably for the same reason I had concerns, that it was an attempt to disqualify 2 out of the 3 members of the electoral board. And I also mentioned that Gina Marcotte, that's M-A-R-C-O-T-T-E, deputy clerk, who's a full-time member of that office, not elected, had testified previously at the first hearing about many of the procedures that led us to be here, that she would be a more appropriate witness, or at least if not more appropriate, would be a non-conflicted witness, and that anything you wanted to get from electoral board member / village clerk Bielski could be gotten from deputy clerk Marcotte. So if you want to make an offer of proof or perfect your record for appeal as to why you think it's appropriate for her to be called, now would probably be an appropriate time to do that.
Well, first of all, the duties that are assigned to the clerk are not duties assigned to the deputy clerk. So the clerk is the witness that would have to authenticate dates and times. There are certain time limits in the rules of procedure for the election disputes. 24 hours for one day, for one thing, 48 hours for another thing, 48 hours for another, time to be prepared for hearings. And so those dates and when those dates were published is the duties of the clerk, and I think she's appropriate witness to testify. So I would be calling her for those issues. And as I mentioned to you before, outside of the court hearing, I don't want to be accused of any delay, nor do I want to be accused of not calling the appropriate person for a witness. So I think the stipulation that you want is that if I call them as witnesses for that purpose, you would advise them not to testify, and you believe they would take your advice and not testify. I think that suffices what I need from them not to call them.
So a stipulation typically is between 2 sides to a dispute. And that's why the issue of the rules, since both your partner, Mr. Hurst, and Mr. Abbasi were present, it was an appropriate stipulation. There was a stipulation, so obviously we're stepping into unusual territory, that the chair was willing to stipulate as to her support prior to objections being filed, so we did enter that. If you're asking me as the electoral board attorney to stipulate that if you tried to call one or more of the members of the electoral board, that I would advise them not to take the stand, and that I presume they would take my advice, I'd enter into that stipulation. But I will say for the record, even more so than just the potential for disqualification as to why I would advise Ms. Bielski not to testify, is that everything you just mentioned about the deadlines that fall under the clerk's office had already been testified to in the first hearing at length by her deputy, Ms. Marcotte. So I think it would be duplicitous testimony. I think it would be certainly something that if you wanted to explore it further, you could do with Ms. Marcotte, and therefore, taking your own words, not wanting to cause delay, it would be nothing more than an exercise in a lack of judicial economy by calling Ms. Bielski to testify to something that her deputies already testified to. So yes, I would stipulate that if you attempted to call either Chair Nitsky-Troicki or Member Bielski, I would recommend and advise them not to take the stand, and I would presume that they would take my advice as their attorney.
Well, the presumption is not acceptable. You can say that they've talked to them and they said they would not take this.
I have not talked to them about that. If you want to poll them right now, we can do that.
I don't need to poll your members. If you're going to give them advice and they're going to tell you you're going to follow your advice, you can represent that to me. Just ask them off the record.
All right.
I mean, I don't want your advice.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. I understand. I understand your point. Off the record, please. Would you, if I told you not to testify, would you testify?
I'm confused. I'm not here under testimony.
He wants to call you as a witness. If I tell you, okay. If I tell you not to testify, would you testify? Okay. Back on the record. So yes, my stipulation would be that if I advised them not to testify. They would not testify.
Thank you. That's acceptable as a stipulation.
Sure. Madam Chair, at this point in time, we have multiple objections on multiple candidates. I think we've covered all housekeeping matters, so it would be most prudent probably to give it to Mr. Abbasi so he can begin with the rest of his objections.
Mr. Abbasi?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So currently, there are 6 candidates that were still being considered. I guess per the council's email, we're not going to have the final decision on the other ones until the next meeting, but there's 6 potentially that we could be talking about today. John Hayes, Kevin Kukul, Ruben Pazmino, Katie Surges, Kyle Surges, and Heidi Hadley Pacella, or is Pacella. And so with the first 5 I mentioned, Hayes, Kukul, Pazmino, Surges, and Surges, the only issues are the signatures, and the major issue is that signers had signed for more than 3 candidates. With those, the issue of proving which was the 4th signed for most of them is difficult because they're all notarized on October 20th. However, with Kyle Surges, his all except for one of his petition sheets were notarized on October 26th, and he turned in a total of 90 signatures, and on the sheets notarized October 26th, there are 67 that have signed more than 4 or more than 3 petitions. I can go over the sheet and line per the chart that was attached with the objections, but it's for him it's Kimberly Patey, sheet 1, line 3, Christy Christy Nasser, I think, sheet 1, line 10.
Is he allowed to do that? No. Excuse me, counsel, you're not allowed to interrupt him while he's speaking. I'm sorry, you're not allowed to interrupt him while he's speaking.
If it's an
It's not
objection.
happening here. So, Mr. Bossi, please continue.
Objecting to him presenting evidence by some sort of reading from the document without anybody testifying to that.
Mr. Bossi, continue.
I'm reading from the objection that was filed and the petition. Those are board documents. They're so I.
They're not board documents. They're petitions and objections. They have to be approved. It is your burden of proof, not mine, not the board's, but yours.
That's incorrect. That's incorrect. The board can take judicial notice of its documents. The petition and the I asked the board to take judicial notice of the petitions and the objections that were filed.
Again, I don't have a problem with the board recognizing the objection filed and the petition filed, but he's trying to prove what signature was first on several petitions. There is no evidence to that whatsoever.
Madam Chair, would you like my assistance?
Yes.
All right, so 2 things. First of all, Mr. Brueggemann, we talked about this at the last date. What can't happen in any proceeding, whether it be court or administrative, is a back and forth where you argue objections over and over and over again, or when the board gives their ruling and you want to start arguing with their ruling after objections have already been heard, number 1. Number 2, it sounds like Mr. Abbasi, Madam Chair, has asked this board to take judicial notice of his pleadings, which were the objections that he filed to these, I believe, 14 candidates. Is that correct, Mr. Abbasi?
That's correct.
So Mr. Abbasi is correct in that this board can take judicial notice of the pleadings, and then we can get into the issue of whether there's testimony or not. But also, just for clarification's sake, since we have a back and forth objection here, if I'm understanding correctly, Mr. Bassi, is your argument that of all these candidates, many of them submitted petitions that were notarized by the circulator on October 20th, is that correct?
That's correct, and so that's the case with John Hayes, Kevin Kukul, and Ruben Pazmino. Their sheets all have the notarization date of October 20th.
So just so I can help the board here, so we'll see if I understand your argument. It's your argument then if someone has something that's circulated and notarized the 26th, clearly it couldn't have been one of the first 3 signatures.
That's the argument I'm making, yes.
Okay.
Objection.
I'm just asking if that's what his argument is. Now you could.
Stating a fact. I could sign a petition on June 1st, and it could be notarized as with the entire petition on October 20th or October 26th.
That's not true.
It is true.
No, there's a certain date that you can't start submitting petitions for signature.
I got that. But
Okay.
the certain date being the certain date.
Right.
It can be signed earlier. And so
I asked if that was his argument, he said yes.
Okay.
So,
an argument is not evidence.
That's
You
true.
understand that? And you're asking this board to make a ruling on evidence.
no, I'm not asking them to make a ruling on anything other than he's asked them to take judicial notice of these documents. So that's where we're at right now. I just wanted to see if I understood his argument as to these documents, which will be the next step.
Right, so,
Now, I may not object to the offering of an evidence, of a document that's been filed. What I'm objecting to, and you got to listen to me, I'm objecting, he's trying to claim he's given evidence of which signature was the first signature, which was the second, which was the third, and which was the fourth or last. He has no evidence of that, and when they were notarized doesn't prove when a first signature was put on a document. So if you're really trying to ask the court, this hearing board, to take judicial notice of a fact that's not clear on the petition, it's erroneous. That's my position. I won't say another word. Go ahead and make the error if you want.
and I'll explain my argument more, and then it'll be up to the board to, yeah.
Counsel, 1 second. So first, this board should decide whether it wants to take judicial notice, not of a fact, but of the documents. So is this board comfortable taking, all you're saying is we're taking notice of these documents as they're presented? And then
Didn't we already do that when we got the
you
document?
accepted the documents, but you didn't take judicial notice of the contents, and the dates are, there's a separate argument Mr. Brueggemann's making, which they can argue about that, but right now, would you take judicial notice of the documents as presented?
Yes, without even pointing that out, I
Okay.
recognize that.
Okay. With that, Mr. Rossi could proceed.
So I'll state that the objector doesn't have witnesses or affidavits to from a certain person, say Kimberly Patey saying, I signed this one, and this one first, this is the fourth one I signed. The argument that I'm making, the evidence, and it's up to the board to give whatever weight to the evidence they want, and Mr. Brueggemann can argue that, okay, maybe I shouldn't give it weight. I'm going to argue we should give it weight, is the notarization date. If, again, it's up to the board to give the notarization date whatever weight they want, and make their determination.
My objection, so I can make it clear. I was waiting till you finish talking.
Well, and I might say, I think, Mr. Brueggemann, you're more making an argument than I'm just making my argument on this based on the date. You can make your argument that the board
Thank you for
shouldn't do it,
telling me
so.
what argument I can make.
Oh, you're
My
framing it as an
argument is an
objection.
objection to the presentation of something as evidence when it has no evidentiary value of who signed a particular petition on what date. And while you can take judicial knowledge of the content of the petition, there is no place on that petition for a supporter to say, I support the candidacy and nominate him as a candidate on June 1st, November 1st, any date. That date doesn't appear anywhere on there. The fact that they were all notarized on a particular date may be evidence that they were all signed before that particular date, but the notary doesn't make it proof of what day they were signed. And without proof of what day they were signed, this board can't disqualify any petition and can't vote in favor of an objection to disqualify a person who signed a petition for a candidate. And there's federal case law on that from 2 years ago and 4 years ago that is abundant.
So to that, I'll say that Kyle Surges does have one sheet that is notarized October 20th. The others are notarized October 26th. If the court so chooses, they can decide that because he was able to get one notarized on October 20th and the others were notarized 6 days later, that those signatures were obtained in those subsequent 6 days. That's up to the board to make as a trier of fact.
Madam Chair, may I? So I'm looking back at the objector's petition. I want to make sure I understand this correctly, because on the objector's petition filed November 4th, it indicates there were 90 purported voters, which is what you said today. That hasn't changed.
Yes.
Then there's a couple places where you talk about 62 signatures who signed 4 or more times. But today you said there were 67 from sheets that were that were notarized by the circulator on October 26th. Can you reconcile those two differences so I can advise the board properly?
So I believe that's, I noticed that some of these signatures are duplicates, like Lily Morella signed both, where did she sign? She signed both sheet 5, line 4 with the October 26th date and sheet 7, line 1 with an October 26th date. I think the math may, it also mentions duplicates in the objection. I'm, for now, lumping them all as post, is the fourth or beyond objection. So that's where I'm getting the 67 number today. But it, even at 62, it's, I mean, it's,
Okay.
yeah, it's every signature on sheet 3, every signature on sheet 4, every signature on sheet 5, every signature on sheet 6, every signature on sheet 7, every signature on sheet 8, and 2 on sheet 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on sheet 2. So that's, but that includes duplicates as well. So, we could disqualify some as duplicates, but they're all, regardless, they're all on a October 26 sheet. And as, again, to the argument made, Mr. Surges did have one sheet notarized on October 20th, which shows, I'm making the argument, based on this being the evidence, that if he had these sheets prior to October 20th, or on October 20th, when all the other sheets were notarized, and that's, the other ones we're not going to be able to piece apart. They're all dated October 20th, so we're not going to be able to piece apart who signed 4th, 5th, whenever. But in this case, since presumably he would have had these notarized along with them if he had it, I'd say that these signatures are beyond 3, beyond the 3rd, the 4th or more. And the electoral code says for nonpartisan and independent candidates, you can only sign one petition per nomination. In this case, there's 3 seats to be filled, so you can sign up to 3. And these, per the chart submitted with the objections, and the chart shows which other candidates they had signed for, these individuals. Since Kyle, Mr. Surges, has these on October 26th, I'd argue that my argument is that the board, with the facts with those being the facts in front of it, determined that these were signed later than the other ones. Again, the other ones we're not going to be able to piece apart, but these do appear to be signed later, and that the board invalidate those signatures, which would put Mr. Surges under 70.
All right, so a couple questions based on that so I can advise the board. How many signatures were on the sheet for Kyle Surges that was circulated, or was notarized and circulated on October 20th?
Circulated and notarized is
I said
not
notarized.
the same thing.
How many were on that sheet?
Notarized and circulated.
Counsel, I'm asking a question. You don't object to a question if it's coming from the chair's attorney. I'm just trying to get an answer from him.
There are 10 signatures on this sheet,
All right.
which is sheet number 9 of Mr. Surges.
Okay. And to further advise this board, are you then saying that all the other candidates on the issue of signing 4 or more petitions, are you saying you admit that you don't have the capability of determining who signed first through third?
I am, yes.
So therefore, are you withdrawing your objection on those, leaving it only on the Kyle Surges objection?
Yes.
Okay. So, just so this board understands his argument, you've taken judicial notice of the petition sheets as submitted by Kyle Surges. You've taken judicial notice of the objection filed by Mr. Carlson, and his argument is based on the evidence that's contained therein. We have a whole bunch of 14 or 15 candidates that are circulating sheets that are all notarized on October 20th. He's telling you he has no way of knowing who signed first, second, third, because once they get to signature 3, that signer is cut off. Any signature that they put down on paper for 4 through 15, for example, would be void, because they're only allowed to sign it as many petitions as there are vacancies for office. He's saying since Mr. Surges had a sheet that was notarized the same day as all the other sheets were notarized, his argument is therefore we know those signatures were put on that paper prior to October 20th, like all the other signatures of all the other 14 candidates was put on their sheets before October 20th, because that's when a notary said, the circulator came to me and with this completed sheet and I'm notarizing the circulator's signature. Mr. Abbasi's argument is, therefore, the remaining 80 signatures submitted by Kyle Surges had to have come after that date because they have a notarization date after a sheet that he already presented. Now, Mr. Brueggemann's argument is, no, the notary signature only says that on this date, the circulator brought me these sheets and I notarized the circulator's signature. It doesn't tell you when they signed it. Now, that's his argument. You are allowed to take, to give, as Mr. Abbasi said, what you've heard so far, the weight you think it deserves. This is not a criminal courtroom. Mr. Abbasi does not need to prove his case beyond any reasonable doubt. He's got to convince you that it's more likely than not as to when the signatures of 1 through 3 were put on petitions. So his argument is, since there were 14 people who submitted notarizations of October 20th, people that submitted thereafter should have been stricken as being past the first 3 candidates, but he's acknowledging that the other candidates that maybe did have notarizations after October 20th had enough signatures where that doesn't matter. Is that a fair statement of your argument?
That is, yes.
Mr. Brueggemann, is that a fair statement of your argument?
Well, I think you ignored the fact that I'm saying just because the circulator's signature is notarized on a particular date, there is nothing on that sheet, any one of those sheets, that says when a person who the petition was circulated to signed it. And unless this objector brings in evidence that says which one was the last one signed, he can't disqualify him. That's what I'm saying. And there is not an inference from notarization dates. There cannot be an inference from a notarization date of who signed the petitions last. Certainly, I would agree there could be an inference that if the notary signed it on October 26th, that the signatures were on that document on October 26th or before. So there's no way you can infer who signed what petitions on what day. Only date is the date of the notary of the circulator. And he's saying, I got these signatures, and he's not required on that form to say when he got it. And so you'd be wrong to make any inference from that evidence of when each and every one of those people who signed a petition signed them. Thank you.
Mr. Bassi, are the notaries all the same, or are they different notaries?
So the notary for sheets 1 through 8 is the same. The notary for sheet 9, which was the October 20th sheet, is different. The notary for sheet 1 through 8 is Carmen J. Morella III. The notary for sheet 9 is Stephen J. Balich.
This is for Mr. Kyle Surges?
Yes, for Kyle Surges.
So, but sheet 1's a different date than sheets 2 through 8?
No,
sheet 9.
Sheet 9 is a different date with, so sheet 9 was notarized October 20th.
Oh, okay, all
And
right.
the notary is Mr. Balich. The sheets 1 through 8 were notarized October 26th, and the notary is Carmen Morella.
Okay. Okay. So does the board have any questions of me, or you understand the arguments here? His argument is that if he had a sheet on the 20th, and Mr. Balich, I think he said, notarized that one, we know those signatures were before October 20th, now he goes to a different notary on the 26th with 8 new sheets, or 8 different sheets. His argument is you could find an inference that they were after the first sheet they'd already had notarized by somebody else. Mr. Brueggemann is saying there is no inference. That just says when the circulator brought the sheets to the notary. Do we all understand that? Okay. So then he's withdrawing his objections as to the 4 or more signatures on the rest. So you have to rule then just on Mr. Surges with regard to the issue of the 4 or more.
I mean, can I speak to this matter?
Yeah, you're.
Okay, so I understand the point of it coming after October 20th. That makes sense. I do understand that there's no date of when somebody signed a petition. I understand that. I could see that with my own eyeballs. But what I'm saying is the numbers to me don't add up. So if you're asking for me to personally strike however many signatures you asked, 68, I believe it was, 62?
80.
I can.
Or 80?
I think 60, I said 67 today, but
Well,
that's inclusive of.
I understand he
ones
has
we're
90
duplicated.
signatures, 14 of them are duplicate, 2 that you are questioning if they're registered or not.
Right.
So if you do all the math, you know, it comes down to that Mr. Surges would need 46 of the 73 people that signed 4 or more petitions, correct? Right.
I think some of those, yeah, basically, yes.
Okay, so just doing the math, sitting here, if we have so many candidates remaining, and you're talking about 5, you did not mention Ms. Basella, correct?
Right, yeah.
Okay, so if we're talking about just the 5 petitions here, my math is telling me, and I could be wrong, but my math is telling me if you gave each one of those 5 candidates 3 of the 73 signatures, they all have enough to stay on. That's what my math is.
And Chair, I don't think that's the argument he's making. He's saying that for this argument, for just the 4 or more, because there are multiple objections to each candidate, for the 4 or more, he's saying that only the first sheet, or the 9th sheet, I guess, should count, because it was notarized on the 20th. The other 8 sheets should not count. His argument, and that's what you should rule on that issue alone, is whether you strike the 8 because they're notarized a different date. You understand? And that's why I clarified the 2 sides' arguments on that.
I understand that, but even if they were notified after the date, the signatures could still remain because there's still enough to go around for everybody.
No. We're just talking about, he's withdrawn the objection to everybody on the 4 or more, but Kyle Surges. And his argument there is that 80 of the 90 were notarized a week later, or 6 days later, and therefore he's using that as his argument to say, well, they must have been after the first 3 days signed for all the other people that notarized on the 20th.
So he's asking to withdraw his objection for
On
the
everyone
4.
except Kyle Surges on the 4 or more, yes.
So that's the first thing we're voting on. Okay.
Yes.
All right, break it down. This is new to me.
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, I don't know if I should move to withdraw and then the board.
No, I already asked if you withdrew it, and you said yes, right?
I did,
Yes,
yes.
so he can withdraw that.
And with those other ones, by withdrawing the 4 or more, they all have the other issues with them, the duplicates and not registered. They'll all have more than the minimum, more than 60.
So are you withdrawing those as well then, the duplicates and not registered, or no?
Yeah, I mean, for those I can, yeah, I mean, the it's tantamount to withdrawing the objection. Well, maybe we'll send it to the, let me double check that. I'll double check that.
One of the reasons I'm asking about that is because the deputy clerk is checking for me with the county clerk as to the issue on registration, whether the two attorneys have to go meet with them or whether you can just, we can have the board submit a list to them and they can certify it.
I'll just withdraw the quadruplicate and more part.
Okay.
Yeah, not the rest.
So, board members, what he's saying is, for everyone except Kyle Sturgis, he's withdrawing the 4 or more signature objection. So the only remaining argument then is, because Kyle Sturgis is uniquely situated in that he's got one sheet dated when everyone else's sheets were dated, and then 8 more dated after that, his argument is that you could find it more likely than not that those signatures were after the first 3 that they signed in total. That's his argument. And you heard Mr. Brugman's argument to the contrary.
Say that one more time. He's asking us to strike those?
Yes, he's saying that he was unable to determine through affidavits or otherwise all the people that signed multiple petitions. And that's, we talked about that the first date and the second date. That was going to be a difficult hill for him to climb. How are you going to prove who signed first, second, third without going out and hiring investigators and tracking down all the voters? So he's admitted that he has been unable to prove who signed first, second, and third because he didn't have the resources to go do that or whatever reason. He's making an argument based on the facts that you've taken judicial notice of, which is just the petitions that were submitted, that because he's got one sheet dated the same as all the other candidate sheets, the 20th, as far as the notary section, to Mr. Brueggemann's point, and he's got 8 sheets that are notarized 6 days later, that he's making an argument that of all these people that signed all these petitions and all their sheets were notarized on October 20th, you could say it's more likely than not that these 80 people on sheets 1 through 8 that were notarized October 26th came in later. That's his argument.
Okay, so you're asking for us to do a motion.
Well, he's made the objection.
Made the objection.
You would make a ruling based on that objection.
All right, Candace, or Member Bilski?
Carol,
Yes, hold on 1 second.
you said, I thought I heard you say came in late. And if you said that, I'm not sure what you mean by that, but if you would say, typically if you're complaining about a late signature on something, it's disqualified because it wasn't within the time limit.
Okay.
You're not saying that, right?
If I did say that, no, I'm not saying that. If I did say that, I misspoke.
I did hear you say that.
Okay, I apologize. So you understand the point. He's saying that since these circulated sheets were notarized by the notary with the circulator at a later date, his argument is therefore you could say it's more likely than not that those were not the first 3 signatures for candidates that those 80 people signed. And therefore he's asking you to strike those 80, and he's withdrawing the objections as to the 4 or more signatures from all the rest of the candidates.
Member Bilski, are you willing to strike the 80 signatures?
So I'm going to sustain his objection? You want me to say that?
What's up to you? I mean,
It's up to you.
how you feel about his objection.
I'm going to sustain his objection. I'm not sure if I'm in agreement, because I don't think you can say when somebody signed it, it could have been that he went to get it notarized, why he didn't have all the sheets with one notary and the other ones, maybe the notary was there the day he got signed. I'm not ready to make that leap, quite honestly. It's a dilemma on how do you eliminate the signatures, and I feel like I'd eliminate all of them if somebody can't come up with a solution. So that's where I stand.
So are you voting? What is your
So
vote?
I would not sustain his objection.
I'm in agreement with Sue.
Okay. So the objection to Kyle Sturgis fails. Is that correct? Okay. Okay. So we got rid of all the 4 or more. And I'm sure it might be a good use of our time to, I think, let me see, she was going to text me. Let's see if we got an answer from the county. 1 second. Yes. Okay. So councils, the deputy clerk got a response from the Will County clerk that if we submit a list of names to verify whether they are registered voters or not, because that was one of the objections I think both sides made, if I'm not mistaken, No, maybe not, maybe just Mr. Abbasi. They can get us a certification back from the county. So normally they require a subpoena, but if it comes from the clerk or deputy clerk, they'll just do it and submit it back to us. So that's something we can take care of between now and the order presentment date. We could have a brief hearing to discuss what the clerk tells us as to whether the people to whom or for whom Mr. Abbasi is objecting of them not being registered voters, we'll get that whole registered certified list back from the county and see if that affects the outcome of the 60 signatures or more. And we'll have that for us on the next date if that's agreeable.
Yes.
I'd like to see what the clerk is going to certify, because the way you say that causes me slight confusion, because there are some objections to people that they aren't a resident of the town.
That's a separate issue. There's residency and then there's registration.
But I really would like to see the answer to the clerk before I mean, I think you could ask for it and see what she says, but I don't want her to confuse those two issues and rule that somebody's not a registered voter because they don't live where they say they live.
I'm not sure I understand your concern, but
Yeah, I mean, for election code purposes, it's a valid signature, and I think it's in Article 2 of the election code, might be Article 1. If you're registered at the address written on the same line as your signature, so even if you're registered somewhere else, even if it's also in Homer Glen, if you're not registered at the address written, I'm talking about a voter who signs a petition, not registered at the address next to your signature, that's not a good signature by, I'll have to look up where, but it's, I think it's Article 1, let me just see, 10 ILCS 5, where it defines, I can go to article listing. General provisions,
I did misspeak. You also did, I'm sorry, Mr. Brueggemann, you had an objection as to not registered voters on Mr. Muller's. That's why I was just checking.
But they dropped. Didn't they pull his case?
Correct.
On all counts?
Yeah. They removed the
Okay.
signatures.
I know we didn't have signatures, but there was an argument about not registration. I don't know if, was that withdrawn as well, Mr. Brueggemann, or no?
The attorney, his attorney requested, not us. His own attorney requested.
Well, that would be either him or Mr. Hurst, that's what I'm asking.
It was Mr. Hurst before him.
My recollection was he only withdrew the objection as to the number of signatures, but not necessarily them being registered voters. So if you want us to certify those as well, we will.
and the section of the election code I was referring to is,
I'm going to have to discuss that with Mr. Hurst, I'm sorry, before I can answer that. But would you come back to the vote that I heard on the last vote on his objections with respect to,
The board did not strike all the signatures.
you did not?
We did not.
Okay, so there was a vote not to strike them?
Correct.
Correct.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I was correct on that.
and just, yeah, the section of the election code I was talking about was 3-1.2 about
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
10 ILCS 5/3-1.2, eligibility to sign petitions, and it just to the fact that what Mr. Brueggemann had mentioned, for purposes of signing a petition, your signature is only valid if you're registered at the address you wrote next to it. It doesn't matter if you happen to be registered somewhere else in the village. If you're not registered there, it's not a good signature.
So that was my thought, is we would just take a list of all the signatures that were on the petitions and their purported address, send it to the county clerk and ask us to certify whether those people at that address are registered to vote at that address. That's how it normally works. And they would certify and send it back.
And if that's what she certifies, I'd like to see it, and I probably will stipulate to
Okay.
it, because I think it's the right way to do it.
Yeah.
There are other ways to do it, but that is a right way to do it.
Right.
So when I see it, I'll
Okay.
tell you, but I hate to judge it.
No, the only other way I know how to do it is if the two of you go down there and meet with the clerk and go through it together. They emailed us back and said they'd prefer us just to send them a list. They'll certify it and send it back before our next date.
Yeah, and I understand the time limit too, so
Right.
I sympathize with the clerk's office having somebody supervise us, make our list in their presence.
Right.
So I'm willing to go that route if when I see it, it comes
Okay.
back. signed by an appropriate person and all that stuff.
All right. So we've dealt with the 4 or more signatures on all candidates. We've dealt with, well, we are dealing with the not registered, but they'll be with the clerk's office. So we have, well, let me ask you this, Mr. Bassi, those signed more than once, do any of those instances in and of themselves cause someone to drop below the 60?
I'll have to take a look at the math, honestly.
Okay.
I can.
If you're going to do that after this hearing's finished for today, would you give me a list of what you think you're going to submit?
I will, yes.
And then, does our consulting the clerk for who's registered at what address, does that take care of all of the registration addresses? There were a couple, there was an objection to a post office box. I think if a person is registered at a post office box, that qualifies.
Sure.
Sign that.
Yeah, that candidate was stricken for residency, but yes, we'll put all of them on there, whatever they put on their sheets.
Okay.
So we're not, well, actually, we're not talking about candidates. I don't think, we're talking about
No, we're talking
signatures.
about signatures
Right.
of,
So if that gentleman signed that he lived at 140-something Bell Road and he's registered to vote there, that would be certified as affirmative by the county clerk.
right, okay.
Okay?
We are addressing those 2 complaints he said about, I mean, I think one was the Heidi Hadley person, whose last name is not Hadley, wrote about the school board, somebody place deciding something. And again, if she's registered to vote at that address,
But you just said you were concerned about the county clerk conflating registration with residency. They're 2 separate issues. So the clerk will tell us if someone's registered at that address.
right,
And there's a separate issue as to whether they actually reside there. The perfect example was one of the candidates that was knocked off at the last hearing. He could have been registered to vote at that Meath address. I don't know if he was or wasn't. That never came out yet. But he certainly didn't live there based on the testimony that he gave up himself. So they're 2 separate issues. Registration and residency are not equivalencies.
and I agree to that, but we haven't presented any evidence yet on residency, because residency is 90% what you intend.
No, it's not. No, it's not. That's not what the case law says at all. Not even close. It's not. And that's what happened at that last hearing. But we have talked about residency for 2 candidates so far. That was Mr. Marine and Mr. Fialco. We have not talked about residency for anyone else yet. You're right on that. And we haven't talked about registration for anybody until we get the clerk's rolls back.
Okay, so,
So, Mr. Abbasi, does that leave us with the nickname case is the only one left?
Yes, yeah, we have
Okay.
Ms. Pacella, who I'd like to call as a witness to the issue raised in Section 12 of the objection of Mr. Carlson against Mrs. Pacella. Is it Pacella or Pacella? I'm not sure. I apologize if I'm pronouncing wrong, but which says candidates' nomination papers are invalid in their entirety because her ballot name, Heidi, quote, Hadley Pacella, violates 10 ILCS 5/10-5.1, which states, in the designation of the name of a candidate on a certificate of nomination or nomination papers, the candidate's given name or names, initial or initials, a nickname by which the candidate is commonly known, or a combination thereof may be used in addition to the candidate's surname. We're arguing that Hadley is not a nickname by which the candidate is commonly known. Additionally, we're arguing it's a political slogan, so.
Political what?
Slogan.
It's a street address.
I'll
How's that a political slogan?
present my case.
I'm glad to hear you're going to finally present a case.
Mr. Brugan, come on, we're doing it again. This is not how court works.
I mean,
Even
I
an
can,
administrator.
if you want me to read the rest of this paragraph, it says, in this case, no, I'll present the case. I'll present the case.
You don't need to read the law.
I'd like to call, is Hadley Pacella here?
Yes, they're right here.
Oh, and could you swear her in?
You sound sure the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
yes. Can you make sure she has a microphone, please?
I was going to say, have you been hearing us okay? Okay, thank you.
Could you please state your name?
Heidi Pasella.
And did you have your driver's license?
I do not have my driver's license on me.
Do you have a middle name?
Yes,
And what's your middle name?
Christina.
And is Pasella your married name or maiden name?
Married.
And what was your maiden name?
Johannes.
And what name is on your petitions? What full name?
Heidi, and then in quotes, Hadley Pasella.
And is Hadley a middle name?
No, it's not.
Is it a maiden name?
No.
Is it, do members of your family call you Hadley?
One or two.
Do coworkers call you Hadley?
I don't have coworkers that would be able to communicate that.
Where do you work?
I work at a trucking company.
And do people at work call you, do they say, hey Hadley, can you, did you get that email?
No,
Do friends call you Hadley?
a couple.
And they say, like, hey Hadley, did you watch the Bears game?
Objection.
They're probably not Bears fans, but no one talks football with me.
I'll rephrase.
Hold on, what's the objection for the,
What's your-
what's the basis for
What's
the
the
objection? I'm sorry.
Not relevant.
Okay, so,
Somebody asked her if she's watched the Bear game. Do you think that's relevant?
no, his question was, do your friends say, hey, Hadley, did you watch the Bears game? The line of questioning, no, I'm sorry. What's your response to the objection?
That's an example of something a friend would say to a friend. It can be, hey Hadley, did your friend say,
Like argument.
do your friend say, it's not, no, it is? I'm answering, we are arguing about your objection.
If this is argument, that's fine.
We're arguing about your objection.
He's deliberately avoid asking.
We're arguing about your objection.
He's responding.
It's an example of a question a friend would ask a friend.
That's his.
Overruled. Continue, Mr. Abbasi.
If not football, would someone say, hey Hadley, what do you think about this weather? Or another kind of friendly
I
question.
would probably say Miss Hadley, if you're referring to my friends.
And what's your address?
12761 Hadley Road, Homer Glen.
And do you maintain a website?
Yes, I do.
And is that website parker-hadley.com?
Yes, it is.
And I have printouts from the website that I'll pass to the members of the board, Mr. Brueggemann, and Ms. Bacella, Mrs. Bacella.
And I'd like to see what he's doing before he.
Yeah.
So I'm the counsel first.
Oh, yeah, before I hand it to the board, I apologize. And also, did you start a change.org petition?
When?
In the past year?
I've done several.
Did you start one about save our historic woodland corridor, preserve Homer Glen's environmental integrity?
If you have a year or a month?
Within the past year?
For a year?
Some updates. It says there were comments from 3 months ago, 8 months ago. It says victory and jurisdictional transfer, January 1st, 2024. Will County meeting, February 6th, 2024. These are petition updates, so earlier
Are you
this year.
withdrawing the previous question? Because I don't know what he's asking.
I'll do
Show
the,
us the document and ask.
He asked her,
I'll do
okay,
one.
listen, I'm going to ask you one last time to be respectful. He asked a question, she asked a question back for clarification. I'm sorry that you can't follow,
The question
but
was
we
pretty-
can.
The question was pretty clear. Was that in the last?
She didn't answer. So if it wasn't clear enough for her, She wanted
Question
clarification.
wasn't clear enough. She
Okay.
asked for clarification, was that in the last year? And he didn't ever answer.
Mr. Brueggemann, you're mischaracterizing what she said. She was being evasive and said what year, what month. He was trying to help her through that because she asked for clarification. The chair is right.
I'll do one printout at a time to make it easy. So, Mr. Brueggemann, I've given you 2 copies, one for you, one for the witness. Mrs. Pacella, is it?
2-page documents that you handed me.
Yes.
Let me read it, please, before you ask a question. Objection to relevance.
It has to do with whether Hadley is a political slogan because it is from a website regarding Hadley Road.
And this document you gave me, is there any reference to any word Hadley or a website that's called Hadley?
It says Parker Hadley Preservation, parkerhadley.com, and it says Heidi Hadley.
And who printed that on this document? And that's not her typing, is it? That's not her?
She admitted that her website is parkerhadley.com. She admitted this.
You've ignored,
All right, Mr. Brueggemann, we've done this now 17, 20 times. If you have an objection to relevance, the chair hasn't ruled on that yet. If you are objecting to the foundational requirements, do that the proper way. For you to argue back and forth is going to make this thing go on till 9 o'clock tonight. It's not proper.
I'm objecting to relevance and I'm objecting to foundation.
Okay.
Overruled. Continue. I want to move on.
Mrs. Hadley, I gave you 2 copies. Can you give one?
Did you call her Miss Hadley just now?
Mrs. Pacella.
Did you? I mean, that's
Miss Heidi.
evidence.
She said it.
And I'd like to have that
It's-
maintained.
Well,
You just referred to her as Miss Hadley.
I'm
We
going
heard it. I can hear. I can follow what's going along. I hope you can too.
So, Ms. Pacella, is this from your website and your blog posts? And why did you set up the website parkerhadley.com?
To inform people,
About what?
a Will County road project.
And I'll give copies of this. So this is from your website, correct?
That is from my website, correct?
With the foundation being laid, I'll introduce it into evidence.
May I inquire before it's submitted as evidence?
Thank you for asking.
Pardon?
No, you can still, yeah, it won't be admitted until he inquires. It's subject to cross.
I don't mean to interrupt. Are you finished, Mr. Abbasi?
No, we're
Okay.
I have another document I'll give, well, let me keep with this first one. So, what is, so you said it's about a road project, correct? Or a project?
Just to keep people informed
About what?
about news,
About what?
about a Will County road project.
And what streets does this road project affect?
Currently, the news on there is about 143rd Street.
Does it also include Hadley Road?
It includes the former Will County Route 1, which is Parker Road, Chicago Bloomington Trail, and Hadley Road.
And who is doing this road project?
Objection, relevance.
It's getting to,
Yeah.
So looking at the objection as originally filed, Mr. Abbasi's argument is that Hadley is an issue, obviously not a nickname. He is now inquiring as to the history of 143rd Street, Parker Road, as Ms. Pacella just said, and Hadley Road. So the issue of Hadley Road is relevant to whether this is an issue or a nickname. If you agree with that, then you would overrule the objection. If you disagree, you would sustain the objection. If you agree that this questioning is going towards whether Hadley is an issue, then you would overrule the objection. If you think this is completely irrelevant, then you would sustain the objection.
No, I overrule the objection.
So what unit or units of government are involved in the Hadley Road project?
Objection, relevance.
Overruled.
The project that you're referring to is no longer.
What units of government were involved with?
It was a Will County Road project.
And did you go to Will County Board meetings? Did you go to Homer Township meetings?
Yes,
Did you go to Homer Glen meetings?
yes,
And did you go to Homer Glen, Homer Township, and Will County Board meetings about this project?
yes.
And what arguments were you making about this project?
It was to obtain information and to be an advocate for people.
Were you advocating for or against the project?
Objection, relevance.
I'm arguing it's a political slogan. I'm getting into the,
Overruled.
were you arguing for or against the project?
Arguing for less impact of the environment.
So you're arguing to modify the project to be less impactful to the environment?
Yes.
When did you start calling yourself Heidi Hadley or Miss Hadley?
Around at the end of 2022.
When did you, let me think, when you were going, when the project, well, I should say, so what outreach besides the website did you do about 143rd Street or Hadley Road, these projects?
What do you mean, what outreach?
Did you have signs? Did you have social media?
I did not have signs, but someone else made signs.
Did you have social media for it?
I have social media for my website.
For either for parkerhadley.com or about the project?
I have social media for that now.
Okay. So the Hadley Road project it's something you've spoken to government meetings about, correct?
Yes, but it wasn't called Hadley Road Project. It wasn't just Hadley Road.
But it includes Hadley Road, correct?
That project included Hadley Road.
And your website is called Parker Hadley Preservation, correct? Or parkerhadley.com, and at the top it says Parker Hadley Preservation, correct?
That's what it says.
And the Parker Hadley Preservation is in reference to that project, correct?
It's also in reference to 143rd Street.
So I'm going to also give copies from change.org that I was talking about earlier.
Because I wasn't.
Ms. Hadley, did you?
I'm still reading it. It's a 3-page document, and it's the first time you've shown it to me. I'll read it before she answers any of your questions.
He continues to call me Miss Hadley. I'm just letting you know.
It's catchy.
I've read it. You may begin questioning.
Ms. Pacella, did you start this change.org petition?
Yes.
And on it, did you say that that the decision makers, I'm referring to page 3, are the Village of Homer Glen and Will County?
Yes.
And is that who this petition was aimed at?
So that part of the or that part of the change.org, they insert that for you. You get to choose that. So that was just two options that I opted to add there because that's what change.org does. They pick up your location and ask.
On page 3 in bold, or I'll move, since the foundation's been laid that it's your petition, I'll move that it be into evidence.
Again, I'd like to cross-examine on this.
At the top of page 3 in bold, does it say, or did you write this, the words on this change.org petition?
On page 3 where you...
Or, I'm backtracking. You said you set this up, and did you write the language on here?
On the whole document, all 4 pages?
From the issue down below, up to where it says Heidi Hadley petition starter.
So that's page 1, the issue, is that correct?
Or page 1, 2, and 3, up to Heidi Hadley.
Thank you.
Yes.
And you wrote at the top of page 3, we urge the county and state authorities to reconsider their plans for this road project.
Yes.
And on going back to page 1, it says you made this as a concerned citizen of the Homer Glen, Illinois area.
Yes.
And it says this consists of Parker Road, Chicago Bloomington Trail Road, and Hadley Road.
Yes.
Do you remember when, and it says does it sound about right, 2,292 verified signatures?
Yes.
And once you had this, all these signatures, what did you do with the petition? Or
Nothing.
and when you went to political meetings, or excuse me, government meetings, did you bring a group with you?
I arrived by myself.
Did you encourage people to go to government meetings?
Sure.
As if you were to become a trustee of Homer Glen, would you be able to make decisions concerning preservation on Hadley Road?
Objection, relevance.
It's
Overruled.
to whether Hadley's political.
I'm sorry, what's the question?
If you were elected a trustee of Homer Glen, would you be able to make decisions on the preservation, historical and environmental of Hadley Road?
Well, I would hope so, but currently there's nothing in place at all, so
When you say there's nothing in place at all, does that mean the project's on pause, or?
it means that there's no preservation ordinance in place for that roadway.
Is the project still going on, or is it on pause?
Parker Hadley, that was named by Will County. It's the Parker Road, Chicago Bloomington Trail, Hadley Road. That project was stopped. The road was transferred. There's no preservation ordinance in place for that strip of roadway.
And when did you first become active with the project, with raising awareness and speaking about the project?
July 2023.
And was that when? And why did you? You said earlier, some people do call you Miss Hadley. How did you get that nickname? If it is a nickname, how did you get it?
Well, alliteration and Hadley, that's where I live on Hadley Road.
And on the petition, on page 3, it says petition starter Heidi Hadley. You wrote that as Heidi Hadley? You entered that as your name, rather?
Page 3,
Yes.
in the middle?
Yes.
Yeah, that's part of the change.org petition.
And so that's your account name on change.org is Heidi Hadley?
Yes, it is.
And going back to the first document, parkerhadley.com, you wrote blog posts with the name Heidi Hadley?
I'm sorry, you said one post?
Excuse me, blog posts?
Yes.
And do people in Homer Glen, in your opinion, do they know you for your advocacy on the Parker and Hadley Road project?
That you would have to ask those people. I mean, some people probably do and some people probably don't.
Did your experience with the going to government meetings, well, I should say, about how many between county and village and township meetings did you go to and all?
Couldn't even, so many I don't even know.
And at the meetings, and I think I might have asked this, but did you speak at these meetings usually?
Not all of them.
And no further questions.
Mr. Bergman?
Did you look at page 3 and point out to me where it says anything about Heidi Hadley? That reference to Heidi Hadley is like a name,
Correct.
and it's like, as Mr. Abbasi asked you, a nickname?
Correct.
Did people that know you start calling you Heidi Hadley at some point in time?
Yes.
Did you think they were mistaken and thought that was your real name?
Yes.
When did that start?
The end of 2022?
And by the way, this is an issue about the environment, is that correct?
Yes.
And it's an issue about preserving historic woodland corridor, is that correct?
Yes.
So it's not political, it's environmental and historical, is that correct?
Yes.
And did you list that name Hadley on your petition because you thought people thought of you as that nickname, Hadley?
I listed it because that's my nickname,
And you live on Hadley Road, right?
yes.
And so people that call you Heidi Hadley make that connection to you?
Correct.
And probably some people don't like to preserve the environment. Some people don't like to preserve the historic woodland corridor. Do you know what they call you?
Yeah, they call me, some of them call me Heidi Hadley. And some probably don't call me that at all.
When you have listed this on your website, I noticed on the first exhibit that council handed to us that he passed up to the board already, it also refers to you repeatedly as Heidi Hadley. Is that correct?
Yes.
Have you ever put that on a political announcement, a political candidacy, propaganda or brochure or bulletin boards or campaign literature?
No, I haven't.
And as I read the first page of the first exhibit, which wasn't marked, so I can't refer to it as anything, but it has a
Mr.
picture
Brugman, I'm
on
going
it.
to ask you to speak up a little bit. I'm having a hard time hearing you. I'm sorry.
Oh, and
Thank you.
It's correct, I didn't mark them, so that this would be one.
It's not marked as an exhibit, but on the front it has a picture, and it looks like an old barn to me with some evergreens around it, and it says Parker Hadley Preservation. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that's that first two-page document, and it repeats that on the second page. Is that correct?
Yes.
How many times did you use your nickname or name, Heidi Hadler, on that document?
On this document here,
Yeah. 8 times you referred to yourself as Heidi Hadley.
yes.
Actually, at one point, it says Heidi, quote, Hadley, unquote, Pasella, your full name.
Yes.
So there's even more than 7 times where you refer to yourself as that. And does it ever, on that page, talk about anything political?
No.
You talk about a well-trodden path,
Yes.
a short survey on the summer, starting off super strong,
Yes.
community involvement,
Yes.
143rd Street expansion project in Orland Park and Homer Glen,
Yes.
and you ask people what their opinion is on 143rd Street project,
Yes.
and then you say the road project is temporarily paused,
Yes.
and none of that suggests any political motivation, does it?
No.
It's all fostered by environmentalism and preserving historical farms, woods, and areas.
Yes.
Now, in the second document, again, it wasn't marked, but it's got a picture of a road, trees, and a sign of a crossing, but it's not a pedestrian crossing, it's not a road crossing, it's a horse with a rider on it crossing. Is that correct?
Yes.
And is being able to ride horses in the woodlands of Homer Glen area important to you?
Yes.
And is that a preservation
Yes.
motivation?
Yes.
And then you refer to saving our historic woodland corridor, preserve Homer Glen's environmental integrity. Is that the headline?
Yes.
That's what I'm trying to find.
You know, I see a lot of preservation and environmental issues on TV all the time, and it seems to me like they're telling us if we don't take care of our environment, we're all going to die. So is this really your fight to save humanity, the environment, and Homer Glen?
It would be part of it.
So do you think of Heidi Hadley as a nickname?
Yes.
You've never used it in any campaign literature?
No.
I'm sorry, Ian, what was the?
Never used it in any campaign literature, I'm sorry. Do you have other interests in the community, not just Homer Glen, but bigger than Homer Glen, including a lot of Will County?
Yes.
And is your interest again in preserving our historical communities,
Yes.
preserving our woodlands,
Yes.
farms,
Yes.
environment?
Yes.
Did you get into any of that promoting of those areas, environment, historic woodlands, farms, nature, preservation? Did you get into any of those issues for politics?
No.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Mr. Abbasi?
Thank you. So the, excuse me, the village of Homer Glen has the power to enact historical preservation ordinances?
Objection.
What,
Judge, board, if they're going to, if he's attempting to say that somebody interested in the preservation of a community, preservation of historic sites, preservation of woodlands, farms, and even old farms that are in this area.
Counsel, what's the basis for the objection? We're not looking for a diatribe here. What's the objection?
If you don't mind, I'll finish. The objection is, what are governments for if not to...
that's not the question. What is your objection, sir?
What was the question? I understand the question to be something different than maybe you do.
No, sir. This is not a question.
You objected. You have to give a basis for an objection.
His objection has no relevance to whether this is a nickname or a political name.
We understand that question. You're
You understand it that way?
You're objecting to something he asked, correct?
Yes.
And you're saying it's why? Why? You're saying because it's not relevant?
It's not relevant.
Done that 3 or 4 times, so if it stays the same ruling, it would be overruled.
Overruled.
So Mrs. Pasella, excuse me, on the first, the parkerhadley.com, which I apologize for not marking the exhibit. I'll get up and do that. This would be Exhibit 1 for whichever case this is. It talks about the 143rd Street expansion project in Orland Park and Homer Glen at the bottom of page 1, correct?
You're talking about the,
The Parker Hadley printout.
and at the top, you're saying it's about,
Excuse me, I apologize. At the bottom, it talks about the expansion project, correct?
the bottom of page 1?
Yes.
143rd Street.
And that's something that a government was doing, correct? Had planned to do.
That's a current project.
Okay. And to the change.org petition, on page 3, in bold, I'm going to read, and if you can confirm it says this. It says, by signing this petition, you are voicing your support for preserving our historic corridor and protecting the environment, endangered species, people's property rights, mature trees, and farmland. Together, let us send a powerful message to our local authorities that we value our heritage and demand responsible decision-making. When you wrote, send a powerful message to our local authorities, that referred to government units?
It referred to anyone that would listen.
And did that include the Village of Homer Glen?
It could.
Was the Parker and Hadley Road project, was that in Homer Glen over the last year or two, was it a big topic of discussion?
Objection, relevant.
I'm getting,
I hear the question because I was talking to council.
I asked, was it a big topic? Was the Parker and Hadley Road project, and I believe also Chicago Bloomington Trail, was that a big topic of discussion in Homer Glen?
That would be subjective, I think.
Would you be able to estimate how many Village of Homer Glen meetings you attended for that purpose?
For this purpose?
Yes.
I mean, I don't know. I would have to guess 10, I don't know.
And were you covered in any newspapers or websites about your advocacy at the Village of Homer Glen?
Me solo covered? No.
Or, so when you say you solo, did you have other people who had come with you as part of a group to advocate?
I came by myself.
Okay. And again, it's, when we talk about environmental preservation and historical preservation, that's something that a government body would do, correct?
Objection. Elon Musk does it with his electric cars. A lot of people do it that aren't any way related to the government. Objection is relevant.
Okay, relevant. Or
Well, it's
overruled, I'm sorry.
yeah,
it's
I'm getting
relevant.
to whether it's a political name. So, is that something you are asking government to do? I mean, he's coaching the witness.
Yeah, I can see that.
I was just going to say that.
I can answer on my own.
Hold on 1 second, just to clarify for the board. This is the third time now I've seen Mr. Brueggemann whisper to his client before she answered a question. That's wholly inappropriate. Counsel, I'd ask you to stop doing that.
I'll advise my client as I see fit, counsel.
All right, then the board's could take notice of an inference that you're coaching your testimony if you continue to do that. No tribunal I've ever practiced in the last 30 years would allow that.
I just got a murder conviction.
Okay, let's move on, please.
It was announced.
Mr. Abbasi, please continue. Let Ms. Priscilla answer the question.
I'm trying to remember the question.
She was ready to answer.
You get right back?
Oh, so when you went to Homer Glen meetings, what were you advocating for with regards to the Hadley and Parker Road project?
Just minimize the impact on the environment.
No further questions. Yeah, nothing further.
I'd ask you to rule on the objection to those two documents, please.
The ones that we've just been reviewing for the last 20 minutes?
Yes. You admitted them subject to cross-examination.
No. He said
Cross-examination, and so you have to re-rule on those.
that's not accurate. He submitted them, and we asked if you objected. You said you wanted to cross, so I just told the board we would address the issue of whether they were going to accept them as exhibits subject to your cross-examination, which has now been completed. So we're kind of saying the same thing, but a little bit differently. Now they would rule on whether they're going to accept them into evidence. They have not accepted them yet.
Is there a motion to accept them into evidence?
Well, he already made the motion
sorry.
and it was subject to Mr. Brueggemann's cross, so now it's time to decide whether you're going to let them into evidence or not. Well, no, I mean, he had a basis, he had an objection for relevance, he had an objection for foundation. The witnesses testified to the foundational requirements, and you've already ruled on objections, whether you want to admit them or not, yes. You could do them separately or together, whichever you prefer.
I would rule to allow them as evidence.
These two things.
Those two things.
Member Stylen?
Yes.
I will too, or I will as well. Is there any more questions? Is there any questions from the board? Okay. Member Stylen?
So the objection is it to not allow her to have Hadley on the ballot? Is it to eliminate the petitions? Is it, I mean,
So
based on
there
her
could be
using a slogan?
I'm sorry.
Based on considering, and it's determining whether Hadley is a political slogan.
Correct. So Illinois law, as Mr. Abbasi sets forth in the election code 10 ILCS 10-5.1, states that in the designation of the name of a candidate on a certificate of nomination or nomination papers, the candidate's given name or names, initial or initials, a nickname by which the candidate is commonly known, or a combination thereof may be used in addition to the candidate's surname. It goes on to say no other designation, such as a political slogan, title or degree, or nickname suggesting or implying possession of a title, degree, or professional status, or similar information may be used in connection with the candidate's surname. So the chair is asking if you have the witness, any questions for the witness. Once everyone's done asking the witness questions, then you would deliberate as to whether to sustain the objection to strike her from the ballot because she's using an illegal nickname if you find it to be such, or to overrule the objection saying you don't find it to be a political nickname. Once you get done with the questions and you want to get to that deliberation, I'll tell you I already read what the statute says, but I'll tell you what the case law says.
May I comment on your advice to them?
I have given them advice yet. I'm just clarifying where we're at right now. It's her.
Is that an illegal nickname?
That's
There's nothing in the statute.
That's the allegation.
There's nothing in the statute that says that the nickname can be determined to be legal, and I don't know that there's been any evidence of illegality of the
Mr.
nickname.
Bergman, you've done this so many times that my head's ready to explode. They're asking where we're at in the process. Both of you have asked the witness questions. It's now time for the board to ask questions. I will advise them of I told them what the statute reads. I read it verbatim. I will tell them what the case law says once they're done asking the witness questions.
I don't think the statute mentions an illegal
I understand.
nickname.
It's okay. It's okay. All right, Ms. Hadley. Heidi, Hadley, Parker, Pasella, whatever you go by right now. You stated that, this is just a clarification question, because you stated you called yourself Ms. Hadley in July of 23, but you also said in the end of 22 you started, and then you also stated that you started calling yourself somewhere in the middle of 22. Just for clarification, which one is the answer?
He asked me when I started, and I said the end of July 2022. He asked me when.
Right, I do, and then but you also stated when Mr. Bergman asked you, you said July of 23, so I just wanted for clarification.
I don't believe that that was the same question he asked that he asked, so I'm not sure which one you're referring.
Okay, but that's why I said it was a clarification question. Then there was another question that was asked, if you ever considered Hadley Road as a Village of Homer Glen issue, and you stated yes, is that correct?
Do I consider Hadley Road a village issue?
Had you ever considered, not like currently, but had you ever considered Hadley Road a Homer Glen village issue?
In during the project, or in what way?
Ever? Was there ever a moment where the Village of Homer Glen had to discuss Hadley, Parker, Shy Blue Road?
How would I know that? I don't know.
You stated you attended 10 to 15 meetings on Hadley
I'm not sure
Road.
if you're referring to in the past. I don't know your time frame.
Ever, that is the time
So
frame.
if it's ever, how would I know that in the last 23 years? That it's been a
Because you stated also, and I mean, we can read it back if you'd like, but you stated that you came to 10 to 15 village board meetings regarding Hadley Road, correct? That's what I'm asking you. Did you state that?
Regarding a Will County Road project, yes.
Will County Road project, right? Because there's multiple county road projects. We have a Bell Road one, we have 143rd. Was Hadley Road ever one of those Will County projects?
Hadley Road was part of a Will County Road project with Parker and Chicago Bloomington.
Like I said, right, correct. Okay, just wanted to clarify for that. And you said you got involved with Hadley Road because of an environmental issue, correct? Is that what you said?
That's part of it.
Part of it, okay. So, Trustee Silent, did you have questions? Because I was giving you a minute, because you said you had some.
Yeah, I'm still wrapping my head around this one.
So we can discuss amongst ourselves
Yeah,
for a minute, right? Okay, so I know your question was, is his objection to remove her completely from the ballot,
I can
or
discuss
are we?
that with the case law if you want.
Okay, can you clarify that
Sure.
for?
So yes, case law in Illinois says that if you find it to be improper nickname, that's what the case law says, not illegal, then yes, it would strike the nominating papers in their entirety. So if it would be helpful for the board, I could tell you what the pivotal cases are on nicknames. If you want to, it'd probably be more appropriate to let the two attorneys argue the objection, and then when it comes back to you for your final decision, I can give you the case law on it, whichever you prefer.
So-
It's Mr. Abbasi's motion, he would go first, Mr. Brueggemann would go second, Mr. Abbasi would go third, and then you would rule. What I'm trying to avoid is what's happened in the last hearing, which is we have a round robin for 5 rounds, which is not the way it's supposed to happen. So if you let Mr. Abbasi argue his objection, like a closing argument, so to speak, Mr. Brueggemann would respond, and he would reply, then the three of you could deliberate. That's probably the cleanest way to do it.
Did anybody have any more questions before?
Right, that would.
Before we let the attorneys speak?
No, I'm interested in the case law.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Abbasi?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. In this case, based on the testimony, based on the evidence, as it refers to Ms. Pasella Hadley in Heidi Hadley Pasella is a political slogan. She's testified that she has attended 10 to 15 meetings of the Village of Homer Glen on the issue of Hadley Road and other road projects. That's something that the village debates. She said that there's no current preservation ordinance, but that's something, if she were elected as a trustee, she could enact. She's started a change.org petition advocating for to let the local authorities know, one of them being the Village of Homer Glen, that there needs to be preservation, environmental and historical, of Parker Road, Chicago Bloomington Trail Road, and Hadley Road. She has been the testimony, and she started a website, again, about Hadley Road and keeping people updated on what government projects are going on. She's made her name with Hadley Road and Hadley Road preservation. And so when she puts Hadley on the ballot, that for her is a political slogan. It's letting people know, oh, she's the one who fought the project in the Hadley Road. She fought to preserve it. She fought to preserve the trees, preserve the scenery, and that's what she will do if she's in office. In a sense, it would be based on the facts. If someone said, if I ran as Perry, cut the taxes Abbasi.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what someone said.
Oh, if I ran as Perry, cut taxes.
Hold on, I'm going to stop you for a second. If we could just have the audience please be quiet. We can't hear up here. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
If I ran as, Perry, low taxes Abbasi, that's a political slogan. In this case, too, with the Hadley Road project being something that there was, these road projects, like she said, she attended 10 to 15 Homer Glen meetings, also Homer Township meetings, Will County meetings. In cross-examination, it was said, well, it's not political, it's about the environment. it's about historical preservation, but that is political. That is something that the Village of Homer Glen has power to do, and if she were to be elected as a trustee of Homer Glen, she'd have power to do so. Allowing her to be on the ballot as Heidi Hadley Pasella gives her a leg up on the competition because it reminds everyone, oh, that's Heidi Pasella who fought the Hadley Road project. That's Heidi Pasella who will preserve Hadley Road. Even if someone in, Indiana, ran with Hadley as a slogan, if they were called Hadley for whatever reason, that in that situation might not be a political slogan. But, or just as for instance, but in Mrs. Pacella's case, it is because of all her advocacy based on that project. And the context matters. If someone in 2010 ran with the nickname, MAGA, M-A-G-A, that wouldn't be a political slogan, but just maybe someone just called him MAGA. His name was, Mark Gallegos or something. But if they ran with that nickname in 2020 or 2024, that would be, because the context matters. So in this case, the context and all the evidence that the testimony and the websites that I've presented, including a petition to advocate for this project before local authorities, shows that to allow Ms. Pasella to be on the ballot with Hadley would run afoul of the election code, which prohibits political slogans, because for her, that's what she's known for politically, and it would give an improper designation of, oh, I'm voting for her because of Hadley Road and because of the projects, and to preserve Hadley Road, to do the things that the Village of Homer Glen can do with preservation ordinances and whatnot. And also, and that's assuming it is a proper nickname. It's something that Ms. Pasella said started in 22, but it seems like she's using it on the, Heidi Hadley. It's primarily being used. She has a website saying Heidi Hadley. It's the Hadley Road website. Heidi Hadley. It's a change.org petition. It's a nickname of convenience because of the advocacy of the project rather than a bona fide nickname. So I'd ask that the electoral board find that having Hadley on her petitions runs afoul of 10 ILCS 5/10-5.1, and that she be removed from the ballot, just as someone who has a professional designation, like doctor, or coach, or reverend, would be removed from the ballot.
Are you done?
Yes.
Complete. Mr. Brueggemann? Can you please talk into the microphone?
It's on.
I'll try to be brief. Hadley is the name of the street she lives on, and she says a lot of people refer to her as Heidi Hadley. They don't refer her as the Heidi the environmentalist, Heidi the low tax person, Heidi Mega. They refer to her, mistakenly perhaps, as Heidi Hadley, thinking that's really her name. But she is using it as a nickname. She is not using it as a political slogan. To be a political slogan, it has to suggest some political course. And I would agree that if she used her nickname, if she claimed her nickname was Low Taxes Heidi, that would probably be a political slogan. It's really a big stretch of the imagination how somebody can consider Heidi Hadley, who lives on Hadley Road, not a nickname,
but it's an environmental issue, crusade, or evidence that she's campaigning by using that name. And I'd point out one last thing, and that's the most crucial here. This attorney has brought not one bit of evidence to suggest that anybody thinks it's a political slogan. If he had 20 people come in here and say, that's a political slogan, he might have some basis for arguing to you that it's a political slogan. But he's not brought one piece of evidence to say it's a political slogan. Thank you.
It's one more time.
Mr. Abbasi?
I'll say quickly, I mean, even if someone is commonly known by even if it were an actual nickname, the law points out that if it runs afoul of the election code, you strike them. And there have been cases in the courts and in the Chicago Board of Elections where I usually practice of people who, they're known as Coach, and they put Coach on the ballot, and it's like, everyone knows me as Coach Parker, but Coach is a professional designation. They get kicked off, or similar with, everyone knows me as Reverend Smith, but they put Reverend on, and that's a professional designation. They get kicked off. In this case, one, I'm skeptical of Hadley being a bona fide nickname, but considering, like I said, its use on things related to the Hadley Road project, that it is political from the start, but it's in the context of running for trustee of Homer Glen. It refers to her advocacy in Homer Glen about Hadley Road. It refers to her ability to enact things with Hadley Road, and allowing it to be on the ballot, again, gives her an unfair advantage because it's a Homer Glen voter seeing Hadley on the ballot with Heidi Hadley Basella will know, okay, I'll vote for her because that means Hadley Road preservation. Thank you.
Madam Chair, would you like the case law now?
Yes.
All right, so there are two ways you could sustain Mr. Abbasi's objection on the use of the nickname Hadley. As he mentioned, the first came forward in a case called Jones versus Municipal Officers Electoral Board, and that's 112 ILEP 3rd 926. As Mr. Abbasi just mentioned, in that case, the candidate was thrown off the ballot for using the name Reverend on their nominating papers. The next would be the case of Rita versus Maiden, M-A-Y-D-E-N, at 364 ILEP 3rd 913, which threw a candidate off the ballot for use of the name Coach, despite it being their nickname on their nominating papers. So if you find it to be an improper nickname because it's not a real nickname, or it's a professional designation, which this one is not, you could strike Mrs. Basella from the ballot for that very reason. But probably the more enlightening case, because both attorneys mentioned this scenario, was a U.S. federal case, Golden versus Cook County Officers Electoral Board. And even though it came out of Cook County, it's a federal case, the Northern District of Illinois. And what that case said is, regardless of how many people actually call him, this candidate's name was Les Golden, and he submitted nominating papers calling himself Les Cut the Taxes Golden. And the federal court said, regardless of how many people actually call him Les Cut the Taxes Golden, it is clear that by placing this name on the 1996 7th Congressional District Republican primary ballot, Golden seeks to convey a political message to voters in the voting booth. It is equally clear that it is within the state's power to enact a statute prohibiting such messages. There is no constitutional right to use the ballot as a forum for advocating a policy or communicating a message. Indeed, the ballot is a vehicle only for putting candidates and laws to the electorate to vote up or down, and the state does not violate free speech simply by failing to make the ballot a usable means to communicate views of public policy. So if you find, as Mr. Abbasi has argued, that Mrs. Basella has used Hadley as an issue slogan or a political slogan, then that would be the second basis by which you could strike her from the ballot. I will point out for your consideration that even when her own attorney asked her that this is an issue about the environment, correct? Her answer was yes. So her own testimony admits that it was an issue above and beyond her testimony that she attended 10 or 15 meetings about the Hadley Road and other Will County highway projects. And I can also tell the three of you, you don't have to leave your experiences as an electoral board member, strike that, as a village board member behind when you enter your role as an electoral board member. And I point that out because I was assigned the Hadley Road project as your village attorney and attended many meetings with the three of you, so I know you were here when those meetings were discussed, when those issues were discussed. So if you were to find that Hadley Road is a political issue, that would be one basis. If you were to find that the name Hadley is an improper nickname, that would be another basis to strike Mrs. Pasala from the ballot. So with that, unless you have any questions for me, you can deliberate and decide how you want to handle it.
Member Stylen, do you have anything to discuss?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I've never heard Heidi refer to herself as Hadley, other than you're using it like a last name, like Heidi Hadley, when you're signing or on your Facebook posts or whatever. So is that, if it's used as a last name, is that considered a nickname?
That's not controlling. The issue is whether that is what people, is there a real nickname?
Yeah.
So my father-in-law, God rest his soul, used to call me Mick because I'm Irish-American, and that was his nickname for me. Everyone thought it was a shortened version of Mike. One person called me that. Would that be a valid nickname? Yeah, I guess so, because it wasn't a title like coach or reverend. It wasn't a political issue. So the fact that not a lot of people call her, as the federal court said, whether a lot of people do or don't doesn't matter. Is it really a nickname? If you find, however, that because of her advocacy for Hadley Road, on which she does live, that's why she's using it for these nominating papers, that would be improper, as the case law calls an improper nickname.
Yeah, and I see it as because of Hadley Road. I'm sorry.
Member Bilski, do you have any comments?
No.
Okay, vote.
Yeah.
Member Stylen? We're voting to wait. Make sure we know what we're voting on.
If you sustain the objection, you would be striking Mrs. Pasala from the ballot. If you overrule the objection, you would be keeping her on the ballot for only the purpose of this nickname.
So you would sustain if you want to remove it because of the name.
Well, yeah, you're sustaining whether
Or
you find it to
object.
be an improper nickname or not whether you want to take her off the ballot. The objection is it an improper nickname? If you find it is, then you would sustain the objection. If you find it is not, you would overrule the objection.
Okay, well, I sustain that it's an improper nickname.
I also sustain.
Vote or abstain, whatever you want.
I abstain.
Carries.
Okay, so is there anything else? I know there was another issue.
Right. Okay. Where's my sheet?
Can I ask a question
Yeah.
about that, even though we're over it?
Yes.
So there's no way to keep her on the ballot with just removing that name? Could we?
Correct. No, it's the case law is clear. It would remove it in its entirety. No, I had some notes for myself, but it's here somewhere. I do know there are two remaining issues that I'm aware of. One is the issue of the clerk registration, which we'll have to deal with through them. And the second is the issue of, here it is, potentially a residency issue as to Mrs. Pasala. I don't know how controlling that's going to be based on your ruling this afternoon. And I don't know that that's going to be resolved prior to the next date, but it may or may not be. What would probably be appropriate, I know Member Bielski's got a child issue she's got to deal with shortly. It might be appropriate if the board's inclined to adjourn to a date. We'd have to pick it with council prior to the 19th, with the understanding we would have the ruling back from the clerk on the registration issue. We either will or will not have anything back on the residency issue with regards to Mrs. Pasala. I think everything else has been dealt with, and I would trust, I know Mr. Abbasi wanted to go back and check his math on the people that signed more than once, and he was going to confer with council on that before the next date, so we know if we're doing anything with that. I think we've addressed everything, and so what I would probably do, and I had offered this to the two attorneys before today, and it wasn't fruitful, but I can put together at least a list of the motions and stipulations and everything that have been agreed upon and circulate that to the two of you. I can't draft an order for the board until they have finalized it, but I can at least put together my thoughts based on one-on-one conversations with them to try and get us to where we can finalize the hearing on the next date and issue the orders right then and there. I could print them up from my laptop, assuming we can get those finalized.
What's the next date you're suggesting?
Well, that's what the three of, or the
Well, when does it
six
have
of us
to?
need to, it's got to be submitted to the county by December 19th. So my thought was next Monday or Tuesday, if there's availability. I know both of you are involved in other election cases. I don't know if you have anything else pending, but.
Monday at 1, I have to be in Dalton, so I could do like 9 a.m. Monday, or otherwise Tuesday I'm open.
We have till Thursday to submit. I believe it's the 19th, that's what, yeah. So if we met on Tuesday and issued the orders so that both sides would have time to look at them.
I could say the 10th, I'm sorry, that's tomorrow, never mind, lies.
The 17th works for me.
That's what I was going to say, the
Me too.
17th works for me. Member Steinman?
Yes.
Member Bilski, does the 17th work for you?
Won't
Does it
be a
work for
real
your
long one, 'cause
clients?
we're finished all the evidence.
It has to be in the afternoon.
Okay, 2 again?
I'm sorry, 3 people are talking
Okay.
at the same time.
Does it work for your clients as well?
The 17th works for us.
Okay.
Well, I was just saying, 2 o'clock works. She's got work issues until 1-ish, so usually the earliest we'd start would be 2. If that works for everybody?
Now, don't forget, I have the right to call witnesses.
I'm sorry, you what?
I have the right to call witnesses on these petitions and objections.
Okay.
Okay,
It just seemed like somebody was overlooking that.
okay.
Okay.
We'll do it, we'll make it work. We gotta submit by the 19th is the only caveat. Are you suggesting you want a date before then, for that purpose?
I think we've moved pretty quickly. The first hearing didn't take much time at all, I don't think. I wasn't here. Second time, we took about 2.5 hours. I think we've been here about 2 hours now. So if we have another 2 hours, we ought to be finished. I don't guarantee that, but
I hope so.
I don't see why it wouldn't, but
No, okay, that's fine, that's fine.
Okay.
Does that work for
So-
you, Mr. Bossi, 2 o'clock on the?
I mean, he said he wasn't
Yes.
available on Monday, right?
Yeah, Tuesday I'm available, yeah, Tuesday the 17th. Monday the 16th, I have to be in Dalton at 1 o'clock.
So he's not available on Monday, so we can't do it earlier than,
Well, he did say Monday, but it would have to be 9 a.m., but
oh,
I
for
know
you.
I'm not available.
Yeah.
So
So,
No, I think the 17th.
sounds like the
is better.
17th at 2 o'clock works for everybody, it sounds like, right?
Yeah.
Okay, 2 o'clock.
We'll commit to get it, we'll get it done.
Need this.
Oh,
So I-
Mr. Brueggemann, so some of your clients made requests for the actual certified letters that they didn't claim, which if they want to come up, or you can sign on their behalf, just the copy that we've given them to you. This is for,
let me look at the originals and I'll take the copies then.
no, we'll give you the originals, you just have to sign the copy that you're acknowledging receipt. These came back from the post office.
You don't have to give me the original evidence if you want to hang
That's
it.
fine. These would have been in their mailbox if they, or had they signed for them.
No, the green card would have taken off and been mailed back to you, but
All right.
I'm just saying, if you don't want to give me the originals, the copies work.
Okay. We'll take the green cards off for our records. We'll have you just sign the photocopy of the envelope. We'll give you the envelope. How's that?
Whatever you want, but
That's what we'll do.
I'm not demanding that you give me your
Well, I get it.
evidence document.
It would be theirs anyway, so.
All right, is that it?
I think so.
Motion to adjourn?
I so move.
All right, all in favor? Aye, okay,
Aye.
meeting's over.
All right.
17.